satellites?
A satellite represents a journey, information gathering, this journey around the Earth. Hey, so you were talking about you've been working out.
Yeah, so we were talking about hurting our backs, and so I've been working out. Like during the pandemic, before the pandemic, I was doing CrossFit. So she introduced it to us. I got rhabdo. Remember that?
Right.
So don't do that. But then during the pandemic, I eventually acquired just the basic things to do Olympic lifting, like squats and deadlifts and bench press. Mm-hmm. So I try to do that, and then a little bit of circuit, just enough to stay in shape. And Ivan, my neighbor / old friend from Bernathen, he comes over in the morning, and we do it three times a week. But I'm
You just do it at home?
Just do it at home in the backyard. It's cool enough in the morning, I don't care about the mosquitoes. And then, so I've been sort of bragging to my wife, oh yeah, I've been so conservative. I've been careful with all of the form, and I haven't hurt myself. I just feel tender and sore, but in a good way, right? No, wait. So last night I'm working outside.
That's such a setup. You've just given the universe the sort of invitation. Anyway, go ahead.
Totally. I was thinking the same thing. I was knocking on wood everywhere I could.
Yeah.
Then I'm working outside. It's pretty late. I have a headlamp on, and I'm drilling some pipes. I have to do some aluminum things for film equipment. And I have this shade cloth that's draped over an old little garden cart that we have. Yeah. And a puff of wind comes along. To be honest, I am being bitten by mosquitoes. So I feel
and those Tucson mosquitoes, they're like little F-16 style mosquitoes.
Nasty little, yeah.
There's big slow ones in places, but the ones in Tucson, I don't know if they're still like this, but when I lived there, the mosquitoes were small and fast and unhittable.
And they're
They were like little fighter jets.
And they don't, how you can hear in Pennsylvania? They like to go for your ankles. So you can't hear them. So they just hover around your ankles. Anyway, so I just kind of deal with them every once in a while. I flick down if it's itching too much. And I don't get any mosquito bites. I don't really react to them. Anyway, so this puff of wind comes along, and the shade cloth thing, and again, it's dark, shade cloth thing brushes up against my calf. And it kind of goes up and down my calf in this way that it kind of reminded me of when you had that terrible dream about the muskrat. Or the groundhog or something.
Yeah.
I couldn't help but think.
We should tell that story later, but go ahead.
Yeah, I couldn't help but, for some reason, what was just, I even looked down, but it was dark. And for some reason, I was determined, I felt like a fairly large lizard was crawling up and down my calf. And just wouldn't go away. It was
gosh.
You know what I mean? It'd be one thing if it brushed against you, but it kept going up and down, I guess, because of the wind.
And you didn't know what it was.
I didn't know what it was.
It was dark.
So I just.
So you didn't know that you just could have just moved a few inches.
Well, so I involuntarily just how I sort of twisted to get away from it.
Yeah.
And I pulled my back. Just in that terrible way where you move so quickly and your back is ah, and I had to put ice on it. And
that's the fucking worst. I was actually going to save this because I had something relevant. I was going to save it for first world problems. But it's relevant here because I was thinking that, that sort of cycle of working out where you're in a good routine of working out and then something happens. I hurt my back last week. I just pulled a muscle. It wasn't super bad, but it was bad enough that I knew I just needed to rest. And it's your back. Everything's connected. So you can't there's not many things you can do other than just rest to get better when it's your back. If it's your legs, you could do upper body stuff, right? Or your ankle, right? You can, but when it's your back, you kind of just need to stop until it gets better.
Yeah, you can even wrap your knee, or if you have a sore elbow, you can't really wrap your back.
But when it's your back, your back is your core. It's connected to all the things. Every movement involves your back. So I just didn't exercise for a week, and I was oh, it's almost better, and I started doing a little movement. Yesterday, finally, I decided to work out. And I do a lot of different workouts. I do, often when I've laid off working out for a while, instead of doing anything real resistance with weights, I'll do some movement. Mm-hmm. So I have these animal movement exercises. You ever do any of those?
They're very cool.
So I was doing a lot of crawling yesterday and crawling on crab walk, sort of like a downward dog, sort of walking around like Spider-Man Spider-Man crawling push-up stuff, right? Like all these different crawling moves, and it was exhausting. And that's the other thing. When you haven't exercised just for like a week,
Yeah.
like it's amazing how fast your endurance, your strength just goes away. It's so crazy. And then I'm so sore today. And I feel like, I can't really work out today because I'm so, like, it was movement. So it's like all my muscles.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm so sore. And I'm just like, fuck, now I'm not going to work out. I should work out today. But it's just like, at this age, it's just such a cycle. Like, you don't work out, you hurt yourself, so you don't work out for a week.
Yep.
Then you work out, and then you're so sore because it's been a week since you worked out. That's like, now I can't really work out because now my muscles are so sore.
There is that subtle line between, like, I'm trying to use the word tender.
Yeah.
Sore meaning tender, and like there's that line that you cross where you're injured, where you actually pull the muscle and you shouldn't do more, you should wait.
Yeah.
But like right now, I feel, other than that thing in my back, I feel like every little like muscles like in my hands or so, like my feet, my knees, and
it's tender.
It's tender, and it feels kind of
like you could work out.
Yeah, you could do some cardio or something. Yeah.
Movement. Yeah, again, it's movement stuff. Like if I do like a heavy duty squat workout and my quads are just destroyed the next day, it just like, usually that's 2 or 3 days of recovery on legs. Like I can't do legs for at least a few days if I haven't done it in a long time.
Yeah. I was thinking, I don't know why I was thinking about this, but there was a guy when I worked at Roche Diagnostics at the cancer, we did like tissue biopsy products, like support for labs and stuff.
Yeah.
But there was a guy there, he was Canadian, he was a former like professional or like a minor league hockey player. Really, and he went to UCLA, got his PhD there in pathology. Anyway, but when I met him, he had cancer, skin cancer. And he worked out, really muscly dude with tons of tattoos, and he worked out in his garage in like one of those cages. He had like a deadlift, I don't know, the ones where you can do lots of different things. So then while I was there, and I worked with and was friends with his wife, while I was there, he got cancer again, like it came back. It was skin cancer. And we started talking, and he said, I've been studying, I have a PhD in cancer pathology, and what I do is I work out like a maniac when I have cancer during the chemo. He said, because human growth hormone is the opposite of cancer. Like it is like poisonous to cancer. Because you tear down your body and you flood the body with all of these rebuilding sort of mechanisms and signals.
But it just isn't cancer like your body's building, your body's building cancer cells like crazy. Like cancer is your body building stuff just in a faulty way, right? Like
absolutely, like it's tricked the immune system. It's an immune.
So it seems like human growth hormone could be bad. Actually.
It certainly could be. EGFR is growth factor. Anyway, so there are 18 pathways for a tumor cell to succeed, and sometimes they switch. If you whack them with a chemo that is targeting a specific marker. But anyway, his thing was, and I have looked at studies where, and again, like you could go into the granularity of, but working out like crazy is supposed to be one of the healthiest things. The other one is to fast.
Yeah, I've heard that latter one. Like there was
fasting.
A guy on Tim Ferriss's podcast who was talking about some studies that showed ketosis is really toxic to cancer. Like cancer has a really hard time growing when you're in a ketosis state.
Yeah.
When you're in what is it? Ketotic?
Ketotic, yeah.
What the?
and to
but you know what I mean. Like when you're in ketosis after you fast and when you're not doing any carbs at all. Yeah.
And to clarify, like it's probably, his point was that when you do a really, really hard strength building workout where you're tearing down muscle, it's not, there's a whole flood of mechanisms that are set into place, and the human growth hormone is one of them. So maybe human growth hormone by itself, if you took it, might be bad for the tumors of certain types.
But you're directing it to work on things that are apart from the cancer. So then, like maybe, your growth is being kind of directed in the right ways or something, and then the cancer is starved from
yeah, exactly.
or something. I don't know. It's interesting.
And all I wanted to sort of say is that he said
Speculating.
when he's doing chemo and infusions and feeling really nauseous and vomiting, he said that I work out twice as hard, twice as often, just because I think it, and he's recovered from it twice. So
yeah, well, he's like an athlete, right? Like he was a hockey player. There's just a certain kind of, we talked about this before. There's certain people that enjoy working out. Like they are drawn to work out. I fucking hate working out. Like it's such a, I love the feeling of having worked out.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean.
But I hate doing it, man. It's just like, I have like, I have this like plyometric workout that I do is jump training, like jump squats and jump lunges and stuff like that. And I hate it so much. Like it kills me. Like people, there's always the joke about leg day, like, people avoiding leg day. Like I hate leg day, like I hate exercising those big muscles and the burning and the fatigue. I just don't like it at all. I wish I liked it.
Yeah, no. But my
I'm
daughter,
just not one of those. But like people who are athletes, that's what they like have spent so many hours of their lives working out that it's either that has conditioned them to enjoy it, or they just, like they're so used to doing it that there's no question of whether they enjoy it or not anymore.
I remember back to sort of a parenting perspective. Like I remember when my kids were sort of, 8 to 15, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to, when we were in the Academy of the New Church, high school, we had a class, maybe it was senior year, with General Nelson.
Yeah.
And we had to do like a little study on we did a sort of baseline
presidential fitness
test,
or
and then we
whatever.
did like circuit for 3 months, and then we did, And I remember he said at one point in some little gathering, he was like, my dream is that you would find some kind of efficacy in this circuit training, and throughout your life periods return to it and kind of keep doing it, keep doing it, that I've given you like planted the seed of a behavioral thing.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, I'm going to do that for my kids. Like I want to give them this sort of baseline thing, and they really liked it. Like we would go up to the park and we'd play tag, and then we'd do pull-ups and push-ups and sit-ups. We would do, and I had this thing I used to do. I said like a boxer, they do road work. They jump rope, because that's what they have to do when they're in the ring. Is they bounce around for 2 minutes, for 10 times or whatever. So you do 2 minutes on, take a minute rest, 2 minutes on, so we would do that, and we would run around the thing, and the kids and we would say like set the baseline, and then if you're doing some kind of if you're competing, you can like work out really hard in that particular skill set or something, or train in that way that you need. Endurance train. So we used to go climbing at the climbing gym, and then afterwards, right before we went home, we would do this, what we called 15 minutes of power. And I would mix it up. Like we would usually do like three sets of sit-ups, push-ups, pull-ups. Sometimes I'd have them climb the 2 ropes with just their hands, because I felt like if you were ever on the mountain and you needed to escape and you just didn't have the right equipment, you might have to climb a rope with your hands. It's like very painful and not fun, but you can do it. And the very last thing we would do is we would run stairs. There were some wooden stairs right there by the workout thing. And we did it 11 times up and down. And the last 2 times you had to jump on your right leg up and down, and then your left leg.
Damn.
When you're like super tired, and I'd be like,
terrible.
Dig deep and focus your power into that foot, and like don't miss, because you'll hit the stairs, So I remember this woman, this other mother came up to the girls while I was doing the stairs, and she said to them, you know that this isn't normal, that you shouldn't, as children, your father shouldn't be making you do this, that this isn't normal. It's not healthy for you. You should just be playing.
Why are parents such fucking busybodies? That's so weird.
So I came down and I was like, what's going on? And she goes, you shouldn't be, this is so wrong. This is really bad parenting. And I was like, I'm trying to train my kids to be like healthy and make working out kind of normal. So it just feels like regular, and they need to have a baseline of fitness. And we're climbers, and we're trying to do those things. And she just was like, no, you shouldn't be doing this. So then I said to the girls, do you guys like it? And they were like, yeah, you're totally fine. And then she just kind of walked away in a huff. And I remember just thinking, like, why did she feel like she needed to, like, mention that?
I don't know why people, like, get all into other people's parenting business like that. It's so weird. Yeah, I told you about, I mean, when the lady, when I ran into the grocery store and I left Dylan in the car for, like, 90 seconds or whatever it took me to run into the store and out. And I came out and there was a lady there like, you left your baby in the car. And I was like, he's 9. I was like, he can unlock the car and get out if he wants to. I just told him to wait here.
Right. Well, that kind of brings up this thing we've talked about before about, like, we were latchkey kids, Gen X. Like our parents, I mean, we could come home and like...
Well, that's the thing. Like, all these busybody parents were also latchkey kids, presumably. Like, what happened to them?
What happened to them?
Yeah.
Huh. Like, do you think that our Gen X cohort is particularly overprotective and helicoptery?
Which is weird because at the same time, on the flip side, our generation is also brags about how we were so independent and latchkey and we drank water out of garden hoses and shit. Like, their Gen Xers brag about that stuff and then turn around and become creepy helicopter parents, obsessive. It's so weird.
Maybe it's just that sort of backlash. Like, I remember talking about when I was, like, I remember my first wife's aunt was very permissive, like, didn't discipline the kids because her mom had been super strict. And she goes, I know I've gone too far in the opposite direction and my kids are spoiled. Yeah. But I just didn't want to perpetuate on my kids the cycle of me. And so maybe it's just sort of that back.
It's true. Like, there was a certain level of the Gen X parenting that you could call just neglect. So maybe that's a sort of the pendulum swinging back from effectively neglect into overparenting, overprotectiveness. I've heard people talk about the stranger danger thing and how, the milk carton era when we would see the missing faces on the back of the milk cartons, like that was a formative thing. There's a lot of Gen X people who talk about remembering that and how that instilled this idea of stranger danger. Because stranger danger isn't really much of a thing. It's no worse it definitely isn't worse than it was, decades ago. It's not like there was an epidemic of strangers abducting children that suddenly happened. It just was something that the culture decided to think about and focus on for some period of time. Because, the people who are guilty of, like the pedophiles and stuff, the people who do molest kids are typically like the camp counselor and the priest and the teacher and the coach and stuff like it, and the uncle, right? It's not usually a stranger. So, yeah. And anyway, so like some people have talked about how, these kinds of things have influenced parents of our generation to become overprotective because they have this sort of idea that danger exists,
Do you remember we a few episodes ago we were talking about Neil Postman and amusing ourselves to death, and his premise that, like, I woke up this morning and I sometimes I do the Wordle and then I go to the front page of the New York Times, and I'm usually just like I browse briefly to see if there's any, like, did we bomb Iran or something, and I kind of want to know about that, or if there's some kind of thing to protest. But it said, like, a plane crashed, a giant 787 or something. Crashed in India, and it crashed and everyone died, 242 people. And I turned to my wife and said, oof, a plane crash in India and they killed 5 medical students in their residency, like in their dorm, I was like, what a tragedy. And then I thought about Neil Postman, like, what relevancy, like, why do we need to, like,
why do you need to know about that, right?
And it makes us feel a little bit sad, like planes aren't safe, and I feel sad for that family. Like, it's like, why do we need to feel those or release those cortisol, those hormones, and feel those things? It honestly has zero relevance in our life. Zero.
Not only that, I think it causes, like, I was thinking about that, like with the Maui fires when that happened, right? Like, I was really, I've been to Lahaina many times, and so when those fires just tore through Lahaina, like it really hit me hard emotionally. And I remember I was working, on meetings and stuff in the following days, and just thinking how weird it is, like that we go to work like life is just normal, and you go and you do your meetings and nobody talks about the fires, or if you do, maybe it's like a side mention, but that feels weird in a meeting to talk about, like, you know what I mean? Like you just kind of compartmentalize this tragedy. Mm-hmm. On the one hand, but then on the other hand, like, why do I even need to know about like, why is it even in my consciousness at all? Because like, I couldn't do anything about it. I wasn't there. I don't know any of the people personally. Like it doesn't, if we think about our caveman brains, like you wouldn't know about a tragedy that happened 10 villages away, right? Mm-hmm. Or like on a different continent or whatever. You just wouldn't ever know about it, right? And but on the other hand, if a tragedy did happen in your own village, like you would process it with your community for some proportional amount of time, right? Like it would become a thing that you all sort of like gather about and process together as a community because it happened in your community, right? So we live in this weird world where we see these tragedies and there's some inner caveman part of ourself that processes it, that feels it as a tragedy, like in Maui or Uvalde or whatever. Mm-hmm. But then you don't process it at all. You just go to work that day like it's normal. It's just I think it can't be good for our brains and hearts and minds, right? Like it can't be good for your spirit to sort of have this tragedy that you're confronted with, like in the newspaper, and then you just go to work that day like there was no tragedy. Like that's weird.
No, it's true, and it especially, I mean, with all of the issues since October 7th in Gaza and Israel.
Yeah.
Like I feel like, honestly, like I'll see a news headline about starvation or something, and I'll be like, get your shit together. Like what the fuck? Mm-hmm. Like what? But I guess that is the kind of situation where if I were to call my congressman once a week. Yeah. And if enough people did, then everyone would be like, whoa, everyone's freaking out. Like America doesn't want to continue to give tax dollars to Israel. Things like there are ways that we can make, if we band together, we can make a shift, and we should know about certain things, injustices, for instance.
For sure.
But you're right. Like I feel like I've, what's the word? Desensitized. Like I feel like when you read a thing,
you have to compartmentalize it.
And then you just go to work, yeah.
Yeah, but it's weird to compartmentalize things so much. Like, I don't think compartmentalizing is a natural state of human minds, right? Like I said, back in the caveman times of humans, like our brains are evolved not to compartmentalize things, really, except maybe in the moment where you need to take some action, like if you are in battle and your friend is killed next to you and you need to get through the battle, right? And you're trying to win right? Like I can picture survival moments, there's a wildfire sweeping through or whatever, right? In those moments, yeah, sure, you need to compartmentalize so that you can function. But then, immediately in the aftermath, you're going to sit with your people and process everything that happened. So then you're no longer compartmentalizing, you're processing. But we live in this reality where we're constantly compartmentalizing. And I don't think that's good for us. I don't think it's a natural state of our minds to put things into little boxes. I think that's got to be bad for us.
When I was 7, back to stranger danger. Like I'm trying to think of like, what is the right balance? Because I remember my kids did Shaolin Kung Fu, they did girl power, in girl power, one of the sort of foundational things they learned was to speak up if someone grabbed them in a public situation by the wrist, let's say. Yeah. They would practice shouting, "This is not my dad, call 911," or something like that, right? Like they practice, and they would do it so that they knew what it felt like.
Right.
And they would do it when it seemed awkward. They would like learn to just bust through the awkwardness, so that if that ever did happen, they wouldn't just be meek and be dragged away, right? Mm-hmm. Now, you could say like, wow. So back to me, my mom one time told me, hey, we'd be on a family trip and we'd stop at a rest stop and I'd go into the men's bathroom by myself. And my mom said, sometimes, men will lurk in there and they'll like sexually attack you, like rape you or something. And I remember just for the rest of my life, when I've been at a urinal, like in an airport bathroom or especially at a rest stop on the highway, I always look, while I'm peeing, I look over my shoulder out of the corner of my eye, and I try to figure out what I would do if someone jumped on me like a tiger, And I think how that one.
I think those ideas are doing way more harm than good.
That's sort of
planting those seeds is doing way more harm than good. I think
that's my
net balance. The net balance of planting those seeds is bad. I think
that's my point, because as you said, statistically, the fact that happened once in Pennsylvania on the Pennsylvania Turnpike in 1983.
Yeah,
but then all the parents in the Philadelphia area started telling their sons that, and then their sons for the rest of their lives.
I just think humans aren't very good at math and statistics and concepts like per capita and exponents and things like that. Our human brains aren't good at that stuff. So people way over index the things that they, our biases are strong and things stick in ways they shouldn't. And so I don't think most people are self-aware enough to look at that and go, hey, that's sticking in my mind because it's crazy, not because it's common.
Right. And I do remember, I don't know if we talked about this once, but talking about the lottery. My wife's grandmother played the lottery in Manizales, Colombia, once a week or something, and then she was killed by a motorcycle that went up onto the sidewalk and struck her. Right. So I looked it up.
Yeah.
I looked it up to win the Powerball, it's about the same as being struck by lightning 3 times. So and how often
right.
It's 1 out of 1.7 million or something, and then or maybe a lot higher. But to be hit and killed around the world by a motorcycle when you're a pedestrian on the sidewalk is actually quite common. It's 1 out of 787. And you think about that number, and you just kind of, it blows your mind. You think so I told what my point was, we could say, and I've had someone tell me to think this way, get up in the morning and be I already won the not being hit by a motorcycle on the sidewalk lottery. Every wicked, yesterday, I won that lottery.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I used to say that to people, when they would talk about stranger danger and risks, whatever. And I'd be well, if you want to really think about risk, then I shouldn't drive the kids to school every day, because the risk of a car accident is so much higher. So if we're gonna just kind of avoid risk like that, why don't we just keep the kids at home, right? We're just not good at thinking about this stuff. And I think one of the net negative effects of the stranger danger thing in particular is as a dude, as a man, if let's say I'm at a playground, right, and a kid falls and hurts himself, or a kid is doing something mean to another kid, right, whatever. As a dude, I'm not going to intervene. I'm way more or less likely to intervene when a kid's by themselves to help a kid or prevent violence or whatever with little kids, because there's a part of me that's I don't want to be suspected of being a creep, right? I'm just going to stay out of this. And I think that's a shame, right? I think that's a shame. I think that there are a lot of good dudes out there who could be mentors, who could be coaches, whatever. I think there's a lot of people who, and not in a formal way, just to just step up in moments here and there, not to be signed up for an organization and background checked and everything, but just in little moments of life when you could step up and be a mentor or a guide or and just sort of steer somebody in the right direction in a moment. I think one of the net effects is men are less likely to be, I think they're just, we don't want to be seen or suspected of being creepy because we talk to a kid that we didn't know, right? And I think that's a net negative effect that's kind of sad.
My first wife was a school teacher, a special ed school teacher, and I remember way back in the Bronx, I would go up and visit, and I would just kind of help out in the classroom. But there was, 2 assistants, that head teacher, and then me, and someone would be like, "Hey, could you take this kid down the hall to the bathroom?" And I'd be like, "No, nope, not going to be. Nope, I don't," because I knew that there had been instances where an evil, heroin addict mom had accused someone at the school of molesting their kids so that they could sue them, and and I was like, "No way, no frickin' way." And I'm so sorry, but I'm honestly not on the payroll, and I will not do that.
Yeah, that culture of just sort of not trusting each other is kind of sad, right?
Yeah.
Like the stranger danger culture, I think, is a net negative, or the stranger danger idea, because it's so uncommon. It's so uncommon, especially with sexual kind of crimes and stuff. It's like, again, it's usually somebody who's known to the victim, right? And
right.
almost in every case, it's very, very, very rarely a stranger. And that's creepy in itself.
Yeah.
And it is a reason for, background checks and all that stuff, and never being in situations where you're in a prolonged situation where you're alone, where you're alone with a kid, it's a shame. It's a shame. It's a sort of like one of those, like, this is why we can't have nice things, because some people have done bad stuff. But I think that idea is bigger in our head than the reality. I remember, this is a weird little side note, but I remember, I won't say who, but somebody in my life, when they had little kids, we were staying with them, and they had a board game that was a stranger danger board game. It was meant to teach kids about stranger danger.
Yeah.
And so you would roll the dice, and you would kind of, I don't remember the details of the game very well, but it was like this family would play the stranger danger board game, and the goal of the game was to teach kids about stranger danger and protecting themselves and blah blah blah.
We used to.
When my daughter's big enough, I'll tell her about frat boys and stuff. That's the danger, right? Like being victimized by some asshole at a college party. That's the thing that's more dangerous than some guy driving down the street that might pull you into his van.
Yeah. I used to tell my youngest daughter, because remember that I don't even want to remember their name, but there was a terrible sexual attack at Stanford. That's made world headlines, and then the judge.
The woman is amazing.
I follow her on Instagram, and she makes books and draws. These gorgeous, beautiful work. Remember the judge let the kid off, and he was like, because he's a really good swimmer, and everyone was like, what the?
Yeah, we don't want to ruin his life.
We don't want to ruin his career.
We don't want one bad thing to ruin his.
Yeah, so I would say to my daughters, first of all, I gave them those taser things. They're little
Yeah.
And I would say, first of all, I would always say, only go to a party with friends and don't leave. Always have a buddy, so that you know what's going on. And then I said, if a frat guy brings you a drink, you say, I'll drink yours, you drink that one. Something don't let anyone have control over your drink when you can't see it.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I told my daughter, while they were there, one of their friends invented, like those strips, those strips that you could dip the paper strip into the drink, and it would turn.
Has been roofied,
bright red. Yeah, it was so smart.
Yeah.
And so go tech. But I said, you could also say to the guy, hey, my dad told me to tell you this, that I have a taser, and if I find out that anything funny happened, like I got roofied and you're involved, I will find you when you're working in the library, and I will tase you on the back of the neck until you lose control of your bowels. And that's not a joke.
I love that threat.
So I was like, so I used to tell them that, and she would laugh, and I'd be like, I would, tell them that in a joking way.
Say it in the Liam Neeson, deadpan, that's so terrifying.
Totally. Or even just say it in kind of a joking way.
What does he say in Missing? I have a very special set of skills.
Yeah, that's right.
Or something like that.
Yeah, totally.
With a Scottish accent.
Yeah, well.
Anyway.
That's cool.
You ever see the Liam Neeson, Ricky Gervais thing, where Liam Neeson wants to do comedy?
No.
And he goes to Ricky
really
Gervais, and he's like, I'll have to find it. I won't do it any justice by trying to describe it. I want to just say one thing about that Stanford crime guy, the not ruining his life. this might be an unpopular take, but I feel like sentencing should never ruin anybody's life. Now, with rare exceptions. I feel like that should be the philosophy of all sentencing. Like when you think about why punishment exists in a kind of a court, in our court system, in our justice system, like it exists to protect society from the person. Mm-hmm. It exists to, that's kind of then to enact some retribution. That's another reason why it exists, right? Like it gives us a sense of justice. It gives the public a sense of like, yeah, we got that guy, fuck that guy, we hurt them back, we got them back. We're enacting retribution. That's one of the things it's doing. Now, whether that's like a justifiable reason for punishment is another question, but there's no question that that is one of the things. There are plenty of cases where we punish somebody, beyond what is useful to protect society, right?
And I think historically, if I'm correct, the Quakers, as a movement in England and in Pennsylvania, really introduced the idea of rehabilitation as the main focus of prison systems.
Right. So rehabilitation, protecting the society, rehabilitating the actual criminal, and enacting some sort of retribution. Those are really the three reasons why punishment exists, right? And so when you look at what the Quakers did, or like the Haudenosaunee, the Native American tribes that were in, the Iroquois and the Seneca and those tribes that were part of the Five Nation Confederacy, right? They and other indigenous peoples have approached justice this way, where it's restorative. Like that, the purpose of when somebody commits an act, like let's say somebody kills somebody, in the extreme example, right? In those societies, the way they punished that person was to make that person pay, or that person's family pay the victim's family. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean money. It could mean material things, but often it meant service. Like, you're going to make this better. So you're going to work for them. You're going to work for that family. You're going to contribute to that family to make it until there's balance. Like, the purpose of punishment was to restore balance in the community. There was no notion of enacting retribution. And in fact, like the idea of confining somebody was just like, it made no sense. Like to put somebody in jail made no sense to that society, because it was like that person should be paying back, to be putting, reinvesting. We should be using that person's talents and energy to restore balance, and we're wasting it by locking them up, right? So like the idea of putting somebody behind bars was just like, they just couldn't wrap their heads around that at all.
Could I like sort of devil's advocate? Wouldn't they have had to wrap their heads around it if the person was persistently physically causing harm to others and refused to stop?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there were exceptions where somebody was just like crazy or whatever, like a true psychopath, and they probably, that maybe in rare exceptions, but those were rare exceptions to the rule, right? Like as a general rule, their society, their philosophy of punishment was the reason the justice system exists to restore balance to the community. Yeah. And so there's been a cost to the community. Somebody was killed, somebody's property was destroyed or whatever. And so to balance that, you need to pay back to those people, in some form or another. And so, so anyway, it's just an interesting thing. And on that note, I was reading a Hannah Arendt essay a little while ago, and she was kind of talking about this very question and talking about the Nuremberg trials, right? And she was just sort of going through the reasons why punishment exists and saying, like, when you're punishing one of these sort of Nazi war criminals for a genocide, for their part in a genocide, you're not really protecting society, because that person honestly is no danger to society anymore, right? Like, if you really are honest about it, they what they did was in the past, they were following, or whatever their excuses were. Mm-hmm. They're probably not a danger to society. It's hard to argue that they are a continued danger to society. Rehabilitation, I don't know. That's an interesting question. So she was just saying, like, interestingly, in the case of the Nazi war criminals, the only reason why we're really punishing them is to enact retribution for what they did. To basically make the community feel like, yes, we punished this person because that was the right thing to do. It's retribution. And she wasn't saying that was a bad thing. It's just interesting. Like, there are cases where it's hard to argue against retribution being kind of a good reason to punish somebody. Because, like, what are you going to do with those guys? You're not just going to let them, after a genocide, you don't just let them go back to normal life, right? Like,
well, it's interesting. I'm sure that there's a condition, though, of, like with my earlier analogy, if those people had, historically came together and organized in such a way that the genocide could basically they could commit a genocide.
Yeah.
There is a non-zero chance that if they were to be allowed to walk free, that they might reorganize and cause other harms, because they have. There was
sure. It's a non-zero chance, but it's pretty close to zero. When you're talking about you could, their power has been completely taken from them, right? Like,
right, but for instance, I'm trying to think of like.
But let's say a guy who's found like 20 years, 30 years later, some of these Nazi, prison guards or whatever that were found, and they were just sort of a shopkeeper in Toronto,
right, like living under another name, and
87, right?
Yeah.
Like, we finally got this guy, right? Like, the only reason you're punishing that guy at that point is retribution.
Absolutely. So one thing that made me think of was,
but like, what are you going to do? You couldn't let him go. Like, it's really hard to argue that you should just leave it, right, at that point. Anyway, sorry.
So two thoughts. One, well, first of all, like, I think of all of the times where a dictator who committed atrocities, for instance, like Pinochet, Pol Pot, Mussolini, Idi Amin, like Mussolini is a bad example because his people hung him upside down, killed him, but Hitler committed suicide. But like Pol Pot died like under house arrest in his 90s. Pinochet lived in like Malta or something for a way long, had like an. Idi Amin got to retire into like a palace on like the Saudi Arabian coast. And so I think for the people and another example is like, there was this warlord in Colombia. He was like an ELN paramilitary guy who killed literally personally killed like 300 or ordered the killing of 300 people. And he was extradited to the United States. He flipped on a bunch of his drug dealing friends. And so he was allowed to be in a country club prison and play golf, and his kids rode like equestrian horses in New Jersey. And all the people in Colombia whose families had been killed were like, oh my God, like he got away with killing 300 of our family members, and now he's playing golf. Like, it just now I understand, like, we're talking about retribution, and does it feel good? Is it good for us to sort of, that's another question.
Well, again, I think that's why I like this notion of punishment existing in order to restore balance. Because when you think about the retribution side of it, like with any of these cases where what you sort of feel like you want, like emotionally, is some level of retribution. Like, just for the fairness. Like, we definitely have an innate desire for fairness in human interaction, in human society. Like we really respond to things that we think are unfair. We're really triggered and provoked by things that seem that unfair, right? But like, so you think about those guys and what should happen. And I think a lot of people would say, well, they should be tortured to death or whatever. Like, they should be put into great pain because of what they did. But like, I like the idea that, like, no, what they should do is spend the rest of their life being forced to, if they have to, work towards contributing back to the people they harmed.
Yeah, no,
like,
that's
in
true.
some sense, make them contribute back, whether it's like taking all their possessions and redistributing it amongst all their victims, maybe as a first step, because some of those people were incredibly, had hoarded so much wealth, right? And sometimes that went back to the state or whatever. probably just went into some other corrupt person's pocket. But yeah, like you could imagine those people being made to kind of, even if it never even came close to restoring balance, like at least the effort was there. Like you force that person to work for the victims in some way for the rest of their life.
That leads me right into this, which was I went to a sermon in Tucson years ago by visiting Jonathan Rose, was the son of the pastor. And he was focused mainly on translation of Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. And I remember in the sermon, he says, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Let's go read the Hebrew. And he read it to us, and he said, what's often missing, kind of like people skip over in the Second Amendment, they skip over like a well-ordered militia, and they jump to shall not be infringed. Like they just leave out the well-ordered militia part, you know? He goes, in the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, what's missing in our sort of translation and the way we say it is, it's shall not be more than, the retribution or the punishment shall not be value more than an eye for an eye and a tooth by a tooth. And he goes, what's implied is that if you by accident or out of passion and anger poked your neighbor's eye out, he's going to have a hard time bringing in the crops. So you need to go fucking help him because you poked his eye out. You know, and it shall be no more than that your eye is poked out.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the literal, even in English, the literal, a different way you could think, like, because when we talk about an eye for an eye, it's like, well, you took that person's eye, so I'm going to take your eye.
Exactly.
Stomp
yeah,
on
and that's
it, right?
not what it says in Hebrew.
That's not what, like, another way to think about it is like, you took that person's eye, so you are going to use your eyes to help that person see now.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so that's a different way to think about just I never thought about that. But even in English, even when you just think about how you could interpret that phrase, you could interpret it that way.
Yeah. Yep. So that stuck with me for, it's probably 20 years ago, but I remember thinking like, that's in terms of punishment, that's a huge difference. It's sort of what we're discussing. It's like, are you requiring that person or creating a pathway for them to provide the service that they took? Like if the guy can't see the wolves attacking the sheep, you need to go sit there and look for him and shoot, you know what I mean? Yeah. So provide the service, or at least
and it's kind of interesting that we, like, in the when you hear Westerners talk about the reasons why punishment exists, again, they'll say protecting society, rehabilitating the criminal, or enacting retribution. Never in that conversation is fixing the problem, restoring the balance, repairing the damage. It's interesting that's somehow not, like, that's a separate thing from the issue of why we're punishing this person. It's like, well, maybe there's other ways that the state can help restore balance, but that, in terms of the perpetrator, that's not part of the equation at all. It's kind of interesting that it's not thought of that way. Because, an eye for an eye could be the way to interpret it.
Makes me think of, like, for instance, I remember, like, in medieval times, even up through the colonial era, remember the stocks? You had to put,
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know why.
That was weird. How come it's not?
Yeah. It's
there
so funny. Yeah,
so interesting, yeah. Does yours work?
You didn't do that, though. It's weird, yeah. Before, but anyway.
So
the
remember
stocks,
the
where you
stocks.
put somebody in the public square.
And then everyone would come throw rotten vegetables and exit them. So one sort of obvious thing is they're not able to do anything useful while they're in the stocks.
Right.
So, like, if they, the other thing I thought was always ludicrous was debtor's prison. Like, if someone owed someone a lot of money and couldn't pay it back, to throw them in prison, it's like, well, how they ever they're never going to
pay it back now.
It's so dumb.
Well, so I have a friend, and she listens to this podcast. Maybe she'll hear this. So she was put into, she was in Joe Arpaio's tent camp prison or jail for a while because of a DUI.
Okay.
And I didn't know this, that you paid rent to be in that prison. Like, not only were you in the jail, not only were you put in the jail, you had to pay to be there.
Yeah, wow.
Like, basically, they took money from you for each week that you were there to pay sort of rent, basically. It's crazy. And then there was a woman, I saw a GoFundMe. This is horrible, but I saw a GoFundMe recently on the internet for a woman who was detained by ICE in Texas, I think. And she's one of these cases where it was like a mom picking up her kids from school where she should never have been picked up in the first place. But her lawyers managed to get her out of, detention, and she was released with an ankle monitor. And her husband was deported, right? So the dad was deported. He was the main breadwinner. So suddenly she's got kids and no income, and she's got this ankle monitor and under house arrest, basically. Well, I think she's allowed to go out, but she has an ankle monitor. But she has to pay like per week to have for the ankle monitor. Like there's a charge for her ankle monitor that they put on her. So she's got no income, kids, and just to add insult to injury, has to pay for the fucking ankle monitor. That's the society we live in. Yeah. Anyway.
I mean, we could go down that rabbit hole of like the unfairness of cash bail, the unfairness of like, in Florida, for instance, the legislature passed a law. It was actually, the people voted for, if you've served your time, you can vote again.
Yeah. I remember that.
You regain, right? So what the Republican legislature did was they said it's illegal to vote again if you haven't paid all of your court costs.
Right. Which could be thousands of dollars for these people that have no...
Well, also there was the system, there was no way of checking. Like you couldn't like log in and be like, I owe $1,500 to the Maricopa County, Sheriff Arpaio's, rent. You couldn't do that. So what evil, Governor, Ron DeSanctimonious did, DeSanctimonious, is he would have his agents. He had this weird brown shirt kind of group that were like state police, and they would go just to scare people into not voting. They would go and like look up in multiple counties and find like little he owes $15.95 to like this to the court clerk for cigarettes. I don't know, whatever it was, and then they would go to that person's house and arrest them because they voted, even though when they applied for their voter ID, the state gave it to them. You know what I mean? So the state voter ID.
So just to create the chilling effect of that,
exactly, like you just didn't know whether, like if the county recorder gave you a voter ID card, that didn't matter because in some other in another county you might have committed a crime years ago, did your time, and then you owe this that you don't even know it's there, right? So to me, that's just flat out that's voter suppression and
awfulness.
It's meanness
that some people are willing to perpetrate or defend. It's crazy. It's just it makes me. I can go into sort of deep despair just thinking about. Me, we were talking about Idi Amin and Pol Pot and all these people. The thing I always come back to is just the everyday people who are willing to either do these things or defend these things. And you're seeing it every day now with these people being rounded up and they're, supposedly going into foster homes and detaining, arresting kids, foster kids and who are here without papers or whatever, right? Like just horrible, horrible things. And no matter how horrible it is, there's always people in the comments that are like, well, their parents shouldn't have brought them here, right? Like they're defending it on some level. And you're just like, what kind of person are you if you can't just say, you can't look at that and go, that's awful, that should never happen. If the first thing that comes to mind is, well, fuck around and find out. Like if that's the thing that comes into your head when you see that, like you're just a bad person.
Yeah.
And it just makes me feel this despair, to feel like I'm surrounded by, well, not surrounded by, but like there's just bad people. There's a lot of, I don't want to write off anybody as bad, but that just seems like if you say that, if you're willing to defend that shit, you're just, on some level, you're just a bad person.
Yeah.
And I don't like it. It depresses me.
It is. It's true. For me, it's I've talked about the 3 days of the Condor phenomenon, where remember Robert Redford's character is supposed to he's a writer, and he would come up with worst case scenarios so that the intelligence infrastructure could sort of prepare for them or prevent them, right? So in my case, I can just I can look at what's kind of happening now in the United States, and I can think, well, if I was evil and I was in the administration, here's what I would do to be the worst, to bring it around quickly. And the fact that the things that I hate the fact that I can even think of what could be done, because then someone else might think of it,
Right. And it feels like they are. It feels like whatever you're able to think of, they're doing something a little bit worse than that.
Right. Like I also think okay, here's since we're talking about it, what I never quite understood about if you were an oligarch, wouldn't you want the middle class to be so fat and happy that there was no violence and problems? Why would you want to wreck society and make everyone suffer so that you had to drive around in an armored car and live, you know what I mean? Why would you? It just seems illogical, but I don't know. I'm not an oligarch. Yeah. But so here's
No, I agree. It seems illogical. It doesn't make intuitive sense.
So last night I was in Nebraska, in Omaha, Nebraska, raided a meat packing plant. And there were 140 people working there, and they arrested between 70 and 80. The meatpacking plant owner said, we're using the federal database to hire people, and we're following the rules exactly.
Right. They're arresting people who have work permits.
Yeah.
They're just trying so hard to meet these quotas that they put out there for themselves.
But
because they said they're going to target criminals, and they don't have enough. So they're just anyway. Go ahead.
So here's what I think is fascinating. If you kind of just game theory it out, a great way to raise the price of beef, is to take away half of the people who process and butcher the meat. What?
Just make meat unsafe or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a terrible, terrible choice to do.
There's so many things that just feel like we're just shooting ourselves in the nuts for no reason as a country. That's one of them. Because what is the end game there? Is the end game you don't have meat packers and construction workers and hospitality workers and kitchen workers and agricultural workers? That's the end game? And then what? And then what's next? You have screenwriters who are out of work because of AI, and they're now in the meatpacking plant. Is that what the oligarchs want? They're all right, we're going to replace all the creatives and knowledge workers with AI, and we're going to get rid of the immigrants. And so I guess you, creative director, you're going to go to the meatpacking plant because we got nobody there, and you don't have a job anyway. So
I thought Bassett said I was going to be making iPhones, with little screwdrivers. But wait, so I do want to, since we're kind of at time, we're at 1 hour. I do want to say, and I'm going to put the link in the show notes. But last night, halfway through a Jimmy Kimmel segment, he said his brilliant team went back through the archives and found maybe 10 or 11 speeches or quotes from speeches of various presidents, back to the 20s, and then JFK, LBJ, even then Ronald Reagan, Bush Senior, Bush Junior, that. He just went through
all immigrants, right?
Talking about immigrants, and and I played it I made my wife listen to it because I said, "You're an immigrant. Listen to what they've said for 80 years. And that's what America used to be like. It hasn't always been like this, right? This orange Cheeto this is a variant, and there's been a consistent, persistent
thread.
It
predates him a little bit. You look at the Eric Cantor race in Virginia is one that really jumps out at me because I don't know if you remember that, but Eric Cantor was a rising Republican congressman. And, he was on track to be speaker someday. He was one of these guys that was sort of considered untouchable. He'll never, nobody will ever beat that guy, right? In Virginia. And do you remember that at all, Eric Cantor?
I don't, but I remember Pat Buchanan lock and load. And that was against Clinton. And Clinton, if you go down to San Diego to that beach where you can shake hands across the fence, the bottom of San Diego, that fence was built by Clinton. Interestingly enough. I mean, I didn't know that. And,
Well, so what I was going to say about Eric Cantor is because at that time, there was some immigration reform legislation that was moving through Congress. And George W. Bush was president, I think. It might have been Obama, or the first term. But I can't remember what year Eric Cantor lost. But what happened was he was primaried by a guy in Virginia, a Republican, a conservative, who ran basically on hardline immigration. And it was you are, you're not listening to us. We don't want immigrants. You're working with the Democrats to pass immigration reform. We're going to primary you. And that put the fear of God in a lot of Republicans. It was like, oh, we have this sort of xenophobic current of Republicans that is very energetic about their anti-immigrant sort of bigotry. And we're seeing it around the world. I mean, you see it across Europe, obviously, right? Like it's the main fuel that's driving far-right parties across all of Western Europe.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Right? Yep. And it's here. So somehow, somewhere around that time, like George W. Bush, Obama, like there were immigration bills around that time, and there was a rising set of voices on the right that was really, really angry about anything that was intended to kind of like reform immigration, to allow immigrants into the country, any of that. And so that was the first really big one that I remember was Eric Cantor losing his primary in Virginia to somebody who was an immigration hardliner. Yeah.
Interesting.
And it became a thing that more and more Republicans started to worry about around that time.
If you go back historically all the way into the early 1800s, there was the Know Nothing Party. Do you remember this party?
Yeah.
And they believed that the Pope was trying to take over America by sending Irish Catholics to breed.
Yeah.
That was literally their platform.
Same thing.
The whole platform was that. And they were like a flash in the pan. Like they just got swallowed up by another party. But that's literally...
The rhetoric is very similar, right?
It's
like
crazy,
this idea, either, white replacement or, white genocide, whatever, like great replacement theory, that bullshit. Or, you hear like the Democrats are letting immigrants in because they are going to vote Democrat, steal elections and all this craziness. They can't talk about any of it without manufacturing just insane lies, like Haitians eating pets or whatever. Like there's just, gangs taking over buildings in Aurora, Colorado. Like they just lie and lie and lie and lie and lie in order to create animosity towards immigrants.
It's funny because if you sort of trace the line of, throughout, the last two millennia.
Yeah.
For instance, like that you see that with the Know Nothings that they were anti-Catholic. That they felt like, the Catholics are trying to take over America, right? Yeah. So there was like this. Even the KKK is anti-Catholic. They don't like Catholics. But if you go back to like Ireland, Scotland, and England, there was this period where the transubstantiation. There were a series of wars and conflicts where, thousands of people were killed over the idea that a conflict over. Is the cookie and the wine that you have during the, the communion, is it actually the flesh of Christ and the blood of Christ, or is it just a symbolic thing? And so literally, literally, there are wars. Like we could look up the history of, there are wars where people in Ireland, Scotland, and England fought battles.
Yeah.
Over that issue, and they're all Christians. They're all Christian. Like what the like they all they just didn't like that the other people were like, I really believe I'm drinking the blood of Christ, and it's like, it tastes like wine, but do what you need to do, and they'd be like, that's wrong. I'm going to kill you.
It's interesting. Like there's this. It does seem to be like in the Shiites and the Sunnis, right? Like there are these cases where it seems like people get much more upset over kind of apostasy than heresy, right? Like non-belief is somehow less offensive to people than slightly different belief.
Right, it's true. It's true. Yeah. At the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned getting into a conflict with your brother over onions.
Yeah.
And it's funny how like little thing, like we all, maybe we don't all like onions, but like it's a very common food. Like you find them in every grocery store. Like why is that a flashpoint? Like why, but it's true that like maybe, I don't know.
Like I expect you to be with me. You and I, like I thought we were this. I thought we were tight. And here we are disagreeing about onions. Like, fuck you, man. And maybe it's because of that, because like some random dude, I never expect that guy to be with me. Like he's just some random person. But you and I, man, we're tight.
Like
how can you say that about onions? How can you think that about onions?
It threatens the continuity of your group, of your tribe, and hyper collaboration. So remember back to Southwest, like along the boat beach of Angola, there were these archaeologists who came up with a theory that the Homo sapiens leapfrogged over the Neanderthal at this point in time, maybe 150,000 years ago or something. And they did it because of two things: hyper collaboration and projectile weaponry. So like he had his grad students or his PhD students standing in the water, the shore, collecting mussels off of the rocks. And then one of them would stand up on the beach or the dune with a spear, protecting the group. And we could gather 5,000 calories per hour each. And there we could bring those calories back to the tribe and create division of labor, and we could work on other things and develop tools and blah, 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 right? But that if you take those two things, hyper collaboration and projectile weaponry, and you bring them forward to today, the present, the Second Amendment and problems with guns in the United States, projectile weaponry, and then I think xenophobia is the dark side of hyper collaboration, like where you're working together as a group against another group, and that impulse creates, in the darkest sense, they're the other, and we have to beat them, push them out, take their resources.
That guy who there's a guy who wrote a book called Against Empathy. And it's not what you think, but like that's his definition of empathy, basically, or that's what he thinks is the sort of the dark side of empathy. Is that when you practice empathy as he defines it, it creates that in group, or it like fuels that sort of in group consolidation, enclosure, where you then you focus your animosity towards some out group. But that's interesting. Yeah,
it is interesting.
Yeah, I could see that's the dark side of hyper collaboration.
Do you want to do first world problems? Did you have one?
Well, my first world problem was going to be that thing about working out and how the cycle at my age of being of laying off working out and then doing it after a week and being super sore. So then I also then can't work out. So that was my first world problem. What do you have one?
Yeah, mine is kind of nerdy, but I usually are. So I had bought this new cinema camera used. It's beautiful. And the one thing is that the HDMI port, when you have the plug, it's right at the bottom where your left palm would go. So like the cord comes out, and if you hold it the way you would, it's pretty heavy. Yeah. And you're bending the cord up, and it just seems like it's a dumb idea. Like, why would you do that, right? So I was trying to fix it, and I think I might have ordered from Amazon like 12 different packages of HDMI like adapters. Like am I going to return them all? I feel really
like you
bad
ordered
about
12 different ones, or the pack came with 12 different ones.
Some of them were like 2 in a pack. Some had like 5. Whatever. But I have a lot. I have to. I want to return them all because I don't need. None of them worked, and I started to feel a little bit crazy. Like, oh my God! Like, what have I done? Like, is maybe the problem's not solvable? But last night I solved it.
Nice.
I found the right shaped one. And it works perfectly. But the first world problem is like, I ordered so many things off of Amazon that now I'm going to return them, and I feel really humiliated. Like I feel kind of like OCD or something. I don't know exactly, but it felt like it needed to be done.
That's funny. All right. Well, I'll have another. I do have one. Okay. So yesterday, so I have my Clipper card to get around on the buses here, and I've been taking the bus this week to pick up my kids from camp because I got to pick them up both in the city and it's an hour, each pickup is an hour apart. And, it's like to park in 2 different places. It's like the bus is just an easier way to do that. And I can hang out in the city or whatever. So my phone didn't charge because I guess there was some lint or debris in the charging port and the plug didn't like seat itself very well. And so I didn't realize that. I did notice that my plug wasn't going in that good, but I didn't know that like it never didn't charge. So, so anyway, I went to go on the bus. I took the bus, and then my phone died. But my Clipper card's on my phone, right? And so the bus used to have these little paper slips. When you took a bus, you could be like, "Could I have a transfer slip?" And it was good for like 2-hour window, and you could just bring it onto the next bus instead of paying the fare. So I was like, do you guys still have transfer slips? And the guy looked at me and just laughed, like the bus driver, like, haha, like how old are you, dude? Yeah. So I ended up going to the Apple store, which was near where I pick up my daughter. So there was an Apple store there, and I went in and they cleaned the port out, and I charged it just enough at the Apple store to use my Clipper card for the rest of my journey. But yeah, so my first world problem is just like when we're so digital and you don't have like paper transfer slips anymore, and you rely on your phone, and then your phone dies. Like, these funny little loops of tech dependency that we've created for ourselves.
That's a good one. That's really good. All right. Well, it's a joy to be back at it. Satellite
Likewise,
Haiku.
brother.
And talk to you again next week.
All right. Take care.
Goodbye.
Satellites? A satellite represents a journey, information gathering, this journey around the Earth.